Hello everyone, Mrs. Wadomski here. I'm going to take you through the cutting and pinning of your second object onto your 8x8 square to finish out your sewing project. So at this point, I have a button attached, I have my letter attached using the running stitch. Remember to attach the first object using the running stitch all the way around. Once I'm at this point, I then need to cut out a second object. You have a couple of choices. You can do a shape. I have a bunch of shapes in the container that you can choose from, or you can freehand something. I thought about doing an apple this morning, but then I vetoed it and decided to stay with the star. The shape has to, again, be 2 by 2, so if you make a freehand one, it has to be at least 2 inches by 2 inches, and you can make the choice of doing another letter if you'd like. So if you want to do your first and last initial, you're more than welcome to. The materials necessary to complete this are your 8x8 square with the important things already attached, so your button and your first initial. You will need to select different fabric, again, than your 8x8 square. I happen to have already cut out my star, so it's in a different fabric than what I'm showing you, but you get the idea. You will need your needle and thread. You will need a pair of scissors, and you will need a pair of shears to cut out your fabric. Sheet number 11. Do you need to pin the pattern to the fabric before you cut? If you said yes, you are correct. You want to make sure that you pin your chosen pattern onto the fabric so that it's easy to cut, because if you are not pinning it down, it's going to slide and you're not going to get an even cut. So you're going to take your pattern, you're going to pin it to your fabric, and then you're going to cut it out. Make sure you take all 4 pins. Make sure you know where your pins are, and you're going to pin all 4 so that it holds your pattern in place for you. And then you're going to cut it out. Next review question. Everyone answer this question out loud, please. What do I cut the second object with? Scissors or shears? Everybody yell it out. If you said shears, you are correct. Good job. So once I have cut out my new object, whichever I choose, I'm going to find a place on my 8x8 to put it. I like it right next to the W. I think it looks really good, so I'm going to put it right there, and I'm going to pin it in place. I'm going to use all 4 pins to pin it in place so that it stays while I'm sewing. So now I have my second object pinned onto my 8x8 square. I am going to start sewing this on. I should pin where? Seat 17, can you tell me where do I need to pin my second object? If you said towards the center, away from an edge, you are correct. Good job. Now I'm going to thread my needle, and then I'm going to show you the next stitch that you're going to do. Okay, now I have my threaded needle. I'm going to start sewing, but before I do that, I want to review really quick. Do I need to use matching thread with my fabric, or can I use contrasting thread? Seat 10, can you tell me if I need to use contrasting thread or matching thread? If you said either, and it doesn't matter, then you are correct, because you can use contrasting color thread or you can use this matching color thread, whatever you would choose to do for your project. To sew on the second object, you're going to do something called the overcast stitch. The overcast stitch is basically used when you need to close something up. So for example, if I had a rip in my pants, I would want to close that so that it would not open. So I'm going to use this stitch that we're going to do right here to kind of pull it together so that it stays in place. So for example, that would look like this. If I had this is my fold that I need to close, I'm actually going to sew around this, going around with my stitches. So I would actually only be going through one side of the fabric in this motion. We're going to simulate that on this second letter so that you kind of get an idea of how to do that. Once you've threaded your needle and you're ready to begin, you're going to start on the back of your fabric, just like we did for the first and for the button. You're going to pick a spot to start. I'm going to pick this point of the star. I'm going to come up through both the fabrics. Now the key is, instead of going down through in a parallel fashion like we did with the running stitch, I'm actually going to come out to the side of the star and pull my needle through so that my stitch becomes a perpendicular stitch to the edge of my star, and that's what you need to do. I'm going to go through and do a couple stitches so you can see, and then I'm going to show you. Okay, now that I've done a few, I want to show you what they look like. So here are the stitches that I've done, and that you can see that they go off the edge of the star, which is what you won't need to do. I'm also showing you my thumb next to them, because just like we did with the running stitch, you needed to have 3 to 4 stitches in the width of your thumbnail. For the overcast stitch, which is this one, you need to have 5 to 6 stitches in the width of your thumbnail. So you want to make sure that they're, again, close together, small. You want to make sure that they are not leaving any gaps or holes, so take your time and do a good job. I'm going to keep going. While I'm continuing to sew, I want to tell you a couple of other things. To give you a little bit more creativity with this project, and to give a little bit more ownership of the project, if you want to make your stitches a little bit more creative on this second object, you can. What I mean by that is you could use 2 different color threads. You could do a pattern of every other stitch is a certain color. So what you would do is you would take one color and you'd make the stitches a little bit further apart, so maybe like 3 stitches per thumbnail for that first color, and you would go around your entire shape and you would sew, and then you could take a second color and go back through and put in more stitches in between to create like a every other color pattern. I think that would look pretty cool, but you can have a little bit more creativity with this object and try some different things. One of the other things I was thinking of is you could try to do like an X pattern. So as I'm going through and sewing these stitches, I would actually go through and I would go back and do in the opposite direction a stitch so it creates an X. You could try that if you wanted to, and you could play around a little bit more. You can see how much I've gotten done. I've got one side of a point, and I'm up to about halfway through the second side of the point. I don't think I'm going to get all the way around the entire star for this video because it is a very large shape, but I am going to show you what most of it should look like, and I will finish the star so you can see the final product in case you need to see it in order to do your own. Okay, so I am getting very close to a needle's length and a half, because remember, needle's length and a half is how much you need to have in order to end your stitch. So I'm going to probably finish this point here, and then I'm going to stop and end my stitch, rethread my needle, and go through and do the next batch. Okay, we're going to review ending your stitch because I'm at the point where I'm going to need to rethread my needle. So I'm going to go to my very last stitch, and I'm going to put the needle underneath that very last stitch. Like so. I'm going to check the front to make sure I can't see any shiny or see the needle. You guys can see better than me, so I hope I can't see any of the needle. Then I'm going to try, because I actually went a little bit further than I should have, to put this thread underneath the tip of the needle. I don't think I'm going to do it. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to pull through to create that knot. I always do it twice. Just to make sure that it's going to stay in place. Pull, tug, cut off with a little bit of extra remaining, and then rethread your needle, which is what I'm going to do now. Okay, now that I've got 2 sides of the point of the stars done, I'm going to keep going because I've rethreaded my needle, but I want to talk about a couple things first. So, when you sew, there is a tool that you can use as an eraser. So, say for instance, I messed up these stitches and they were not close enough together, or I, made some kind of error. We have this tool right here, which is called the seam ripper. A seam ripper has a point. The point is sharp, so you do need to be careful, but it's not going to cut you if you touch it. And then it has this red ball on the other side. That's because the actual blade is in the center part here, which is what's going to cut the thread. So the reason we use this tool is if we make a mistake in our stitches and we need to cut some out, we don't want to try to use scissors or shears because that might cut our fabric, and we don't want to make a mistake with cutting our fabric. I'm actually going to demonstrate on the W, because you know I messed up on these ones. So I'm going to put the seam ripper underneath the stitch like this, and then the blade is actually in that middle part, so when I push, it's going to cut the thread for me without cutting the fabric. And then I would be able to take out the stitches that I had done wrong. So for example, like these ones, I would want to redo all of these, take out all of these stitches and redo them. So it's kind of like an eraser for sewing. So you've got that good tool to use as well. Okay, while I continue sewing around my star, I'm going to ask you review questions. So first review question is seat number 6. Please tell me, what is the name of this stitch that we are doing right here? If you said overcast stitch, you are correct. Good job. Okay, so sometimes you encounter problems when you're sewing, so I want to show you one of the problems that you could potentially have. My stitches on top look very nice. They're very small, they're very close together. They're doing what I want them to do, but sometimes on the back it kind of gets messy and it gets kind of tangled up. Because you are doing an over kind of like twirling motion, sometimes the threads will get twirled on top of each other, so all you have to do is hold your stitches, so that's what I'm doing with this hand, and then very lightly pull either one strand or the other to see which one is twirled and stuck, to pull it back down. Now, the thing is, thread is strong, but it's not that strong. So if you pull too tightly, it's going to snap, which means you're going to have to start again. So make sure that you're not pulling too tightly. I just want to remind you, too, that you want your stitches to be very flat. You don't want your fabric to be bunched up. So if it starts to bunch, just remember to pull very loosely to kind of get those stitches to loosen back up, okay? Let's review some more while I continue sewing. Next question. How many stitches do you need to have in the width of your thumbnail? Seat 14, tell me. If you said 5, you are correct. You should have 5 of these overcast stitches in the width of your thumbnail while you were sewing, so make sure you're paying attention to that, please. Next review question while I continue sewing. Will you have to rethread your needle? Will you have to rethread your needle? Seat 20. Will you have to rethread your needle? If you said yes several times, you are correct, because as you can see with mine, I am about almost done with the second side of this point, and I am going to end up having to rethread my needle when I get to the next side of the next point. So I'm going to have to rethread my needle probably about 6 times before I get this star all the way on. Okay, so I want to show you kind of what I was talking about with that, adding a little bit more creativity. You can see on this side that I made my stitches a little bit further away from each other, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through and I'm going to do an X pattern on this side, so you can see what I was talking about with that. And then actually on this other side, I'm going to do the pattern of different color threads, so I'm going to make my stitches a little bit bigger on this side too, so I can show you both of those examples. And then I want to review a couple more things, and then I think I'm going to stop the video and have you just see the final example in person, so that this video doesn't go over 15 minutes. Let's do some more review while I continue sewing. Who can tell me the name of this tool? If you know it, yell it out. If you said seam ripper, you are correct. This is the eraser of sewing, and that it gets rid of any stitches that you don't want to have. Okay, so I finished this little like X pattern, which I think looks really cool. You can make the choice if you want to do it or not, and I'm going to show you the other one that I was talking about. I think this looks really cool, but it's up to you if you want to do it, and you also have to have time to do it. So if you are an adequate sewer and you have really gotten the stitching done really fast, then I would suggest doing something like this. If you are a slower sewer, I would suggest not doing something like this unless you put a lot of extra time into doing it, okay? I want to review one more time how to end your stitch so that you do that correctly. So we're going to go on the back of our fabric. We're going to put our needle underneath our closest or last stitch, whichever happens to be. Then we're going to take our thread and we're going to swoop it underneath the point of the needle, and then we're going to push the needle all the way through so it kind of creates a little knot for us. I always do it twice just to be on the safe side. And then you're going to cut your needle and thread 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch away. And then you have your shape attached. Now, you can see I only did about not even quite half of this star yet, but I wanted you to see what this looks like for now, and then I'm going to show you, or then you can come over and look at the other example as I get it done, so you can see what I did with the rest of the star as an example. Make sure that you are paying attention to your project directions and that you're doing sewing on your button, getting your threads very nice, or your stitches nice, even and close together, and good luck with the project. Thank you for watching.